J-Dog, welcome. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you as well.
How's the week going?
It's been a good week. Finally was able to switch back to working on Xchain platform and digging into getting some of those features flushed out, and got a date tonight in a couple hours, and then another date tomorrow night. So I can't complain.
Ooh, that's exciting though. Back in the dating scene.
Yeah. I took a 9-month break, and now I'm back.
Well, I feel for you. The dating scene is difficult these days, so I wish you the best of luck.
Oh yeah, especially when you just lead with who you are. Most people aren't interested in a little Bitcoin nerd.
Can you imagine what my first dates are like, J-Dog, when I'm like, yeah, so I did an HNFT timeline. It covers 10 years.
Oh, I'm lucky if the chicks I date even know what the hell an NFT is. Like, yeah, I think I've heard of Bitcoin. I'm like, oh Jesus, okay.
Yeah, isn't it that one Silk Road thing or something like that? Or
yeah, don't drug dealers use that? I heard it's dead. It's like, yeah, okay.
Oh man. So I'm so happy to get some time to talk with you, and I'm really excited because you've been in the Bitcoin, Doge, Counterparty, NFT space for a long. You were in the NFT space before they were called NFTs. So I am super interested to get the story behind how it all started and everything. The word on the street is that you started on Doge. You want to talk a little bit about how you got interested in Doge and how that led into Doge Party?
Yeah, sure. So I had kind of followed Bitcoin for a while, but I never really. I was married and living life and working and stuff, so I didn't really dig into it much beyond reading the white paper until it pumped up to like $100 or whatnot, and then it kind of got on my radar. Like, okay, well maybe I should pay this thing. But I, like many people, made the mistake of thinking, oh man, I already missed the bull run. It went from nothing to like $100. So I think I'm going to do, I'll do this mining thing. And so I started mining like just random, I think it was Litecoin. And then Dogecoin kind of came out or was announced. And so I started mining Dogecoin on day one. I mined, a few million coins, played around with it, did the tipping bot on Reddit and was, kind of just farting around. And then I wasn't even really aware of Counterparty, but it launched right around the same time that I like a couple weeks after Doge coin launched. So anyway, I became aware of Counterparty when some developers forked Counterparty over to Dogecoin. And they announced, Doge Party, and that they were going to be able to burn your some Dogecoin and get this token that would allow you to like register words and stuff. And it really seemed a lot like the domain name system, kind of like you can get a domain name and hold on to it. But because I was a little bit of a domainer at the time, but it seemed even better because you just pay for it once and you own that word forever. So yeah, when Doge launched or when Doge Party launched, there was finally something to do with my Doge coin. So I burned a few million and just started spamming words to like as fast as I could to register and make sure that I got secured something. I think I spent a whole weekend. I was on vacation in South Carolina at my sister's wedding or something. But every minute I wasn't in a reception, I was on the Doge wallet trying to secure words and stuff.
My gosh, and then you're just there on your phone, registering Doge Party names. So tell me a little bit about that, because two pieces of history. That's one part that I'm kind of. I haven't really. I've been digging so much into Counterparty history that I kind of haven't really looked into that kind of split. Who were the people that kind of forked Counterparty into Doge Party, and like why did they do that? And was it like just because it was cheaper, or they wanted to do it on Doge, or what was their?
I don't recall the exact reason. I know Adam Levine was a team, like a team of software developers. I think one of the guys was Lars Kuj or whatnot. You can go back to the archive.org and search for dogeparty.io and the website with the original website will still up and you can look and see who was there. But it was Adam Levine. It was a company called Humint, and they essentially, I think that they were creating the Doge Party platform to be able to, use create tokens and used it for their internal project. I don't remember what their project was, but yeah, they basically copied Counterparty, forked it over, tweaked it so it would run on Dogecoin, and then announced, kind of like Counterparty did, hey, on this date you're going to be able to burn your Dogecoin for Doge Party or XDP, and then you can register words and whatnot.
I'll have to jump on that research, but that's a good resource. That'll help me a lot. I just kind of dug so much into Counterparty. I love Doge and Doge Party, so I'm happy to get more info there. But let's talk a little bit about the names that you minted. So like normally, pre-cryptocurrency, people were like squatting on domain names. Maybe companies might want to come in and buy it from you. But on Doge Party and on Counterparty, there's like one name. It's different than like Ethereum, where you can have 25 different Pepe coins, right? But on Doge Party and Counterparty, you can only have that one name.
Yeah, it was alphanumeric, or not numeric, just alphabetical characters up to, I think they allowed 13 or 14, and for some reason it chopped it down to just 12. But yeah, you can register a word, and it was first come, first serve. So if you were the first person to think you wanted to register the word boobs or something, and nobody had done it, you now own boobs on Doge Party. And so there was a kind of a gold rush to buy or to mint a whole bunch of these words first.
Yeah, because the possibility was like someone might, some big company might come in and be like, hey, we want to build on top of this, and then tell them the name and they could use it.
Yeah. That was the thinking.
I heard rumors that you minted JP Morgan and then burned. Is that
that was like, I minted JP Morgan on Doge Party and Counterparty, and then after waiting a few years, and it was clear that Chase is never going to come pay me millions of dollars for the name I secured, then I basically, I think it was when the XCP20 stuff was coming out, where basically you can create a dispenser and on a burn address. And so that's what I did, was I essentially created some JP Morgan coins, opened a dispenser on a brand new burn address, which is like Bitcoin is a hyped up fraud, or some quote that Jamie Dimon did, and then told people like, hey, you can buy this token. It's still open. But if you got to send your coin into the black hole and never to return, and then you get some JP Morgan coins back.
Damn, was that being the destroy function, or you just did that like symbolically to say, hey, burn your Bitcoin and then you can get this token?
No, I think the destroy function was still around, but it wasn't, it was kind of just to help draw some more attention to Counterparty. Like if I just created the token or minted some supply and destroyed it, that doesn't really, it's not that exciting. But if you create some coins and put them on an address where people are destroying Bitcoin to buy them, it gets a little bit more attention. There were like, I think about 5 or 10 different assets that, a few years ago that did that, where, when SRC20 came out, they came and said, oh, well, we can kind of do the same thing, and we can do XCP20, which was just, creating a dispenser on a burn address.
Interesting. So yeah, that's interesting. That's new information to me. So let's jump back. You're in Doge Party. It's back in those days, and you started to create some tooling for it. I believe it was called Doge Party Chain, right? It was a block explorer.
Yeah. So it's kind of the same story as with Counterparty. I had all these domain names, or all of these names, not nearly as many as I have on Counterparty, but a few thousand on Doge Party. And then I'm like, okay, well, crap, I have some sunk cost now. So then there was no block explorers. Like you could only see what was going on by Reddit posts and logging into Doge Wallet. So I was like, all right, well, I'll build I'm a developer. I'll build a website to display what the heck's going on, see people sending their tokens back and forth and stuff. And so I created the Explorer Doge Party Chain.io, and then once I did that, it started, then I was like, okay, well, now I have all these I keep saying domain names. I have all these token names. How am I going to sell them? Then I created and what can you do with them? So I created a company. I think I called it Crypto Now LLC or something, and a website, dogepartyassets.info. And it was just a simple service. It was a precursor to CoinDaddy. It was just a simple service that would allow you to prove you owned a particular asset and list it for sale, as well as associate some JSON with it, and sticking like an image, a small little 48 by 48 icon on the token.
That's so interesting to me, because the one thing I've been kind of reiterating to people when I talk about the history is that you can't judge the old history by the tooling you have now. at all. And in those days was not really, there was a limit on the description with, Counter Wallet and Doge Wallet. And so you couldn't really put too much information in there. And so it just makes it, looking back, CoinDaddy makes so much sense to then use, I think Skrilla called it like layer 1.5 or, a 2.0, where you're doing very interesting things with the token. And it sounds like you have to own the token. It was like the sign message function of like, hey, prove that you own the token. And then you can do some enhanced asset stuff with it, add images, or you could also, on CoinDaddy, you could also like contact other people that had tokens, right? You could do a lot more than just add cool
Yeah, you could prove that you owned an address, and then any assets that you owned would load up into your account, and then you could list them for sale and say, "Hey, I'm open to taking offers to sell JP Morgan coin, not the individual coin, but like the asset ownership." And you could set a price, and there was you could communicate anonymously back and forth with buyers. So yeah, and then it also allowed you. Yes, there was a service where you could. An asset enhancement service where you could, upload an image and type in, a description and some web, site. It was pretty simple back in the day, and update your token to point to this special URL with a JSON file. And then since I ran both that service and the Explorer, I could easily update the Explorer to like parse in that JSON file and display the information in the Explorer. So that's what I did. And also there was a way to, if you verified your asset owner, or if you verified your address ownership and that you owned an asset, since I had the service and the Explorer, you could just upload like a 48 by 48 icon, and it would automatically display in the Explorer without having to like change your asset description. Because back then people wanted like the description field was more like, well, no, I want this to be the name of my token, or like some text that tells people what it is, and I don't want to have a point to some funky file that then loads stuff. So people would just upload their 48 by 48 icon and then leave the description as text, like my coin or whatever.
What's really interesting about that 48 by 48 text is like some people really consider that like kind of early minting images, in just because it's, even though it's using this kind of third-party service to do so. Just the last space I had with Skrilla, we had Everyday Earth came up, and we were like, dude, Everyday Earth made the logo for Tatiana coin, and you can still see that 48 by 48 pixel image. I remember using CoinDaddy when I first made Breitbart Pep, and I remember at that time it was like, oh, $5 and you can do all this really cool stuff with your token. That seemed like a steal at the time. But nowadays there's different tooling, but it sounded like it was definitely needed at the time, and no one else was kind of doing that with Dogeparty assets. And you eventually brought CoinDaddy to Counterparty. What was that process of kind of making the Dogeparty block explorer and then kind of looking over into Counterparty? Did you make that kind of transition when Dogeparty kind of had less users and you moved over? What was that transition like from Dogeparty to Counterparty and bringing your tooling with it?
Sure. Hold on one second. Hey, Google, turn on the living room lights. Okay, now I can see. So the guys who started up Dogeparty, I wrongly assumed that it would be like Counterparty, like, hey, they launch it and they're gonna wrap some foundation around it and keep it funded and whatnot. But it pretty quickly became like, no, we booted this up for our project, and we're not really interested in running servers and maintaining this. And so I built lots of stuff for Dogeparty and was kind of not happy that there was nobody that was more technical. I didn't understand Python. Well, I didn't code Python at the time. So back to the transition, how happened? Well, the developers kind of stepped away from Dogeparty, and it kind of died a slow death. If I recall, there were some issues with the wallet and they never got fixed. And it became clear that like I was having fun experimenting, kind of pushing the limits of what you could do with these tokens, and I wanted to play more, but that the space was kind of slowly dying off. And so then I just kind of decided, all right, well, I'm going to go over to Bitcoin and take some of the tools that I was using on Dogeparty to Bitcoin. So when I went over to Counterparty, I was like 3 or 4 months late, maybe even longer than that, to Counterparty. But I wanted to make sure that I got some good names. There were still lots of good names available, and so but I knew once people saw that I was registering names, other people were going to catch on and start registering names fast. So I wrote a bulk registration tool, and had to do some funding other wallets and unique ways to allow me to just like spam thousands of registrations really quickly. So over the course of a few days, I registered about 40,000 names. And then it was kind of the same scenario as Dogeparty. All right, I have all these asset names. What can I do with them? So I took the Dogeparty asset.info service and kind of rebranded it as CoinDaddy, and added support for counterparty tokens, since it was, all the framework was essentially the exact same. And then I wrote Counterparty chain, just like Dogeparty chain. But that was such a long name, like nobody really wants to have to type that in. So then it became Xchain.
So that ended up becoming the precursor for Xchain. Now,
yeah.
If any individuals in here or that's listening don't know, a lot of pretty cool experiments happened on Dogeparty, early games like Runner, early kind of image associated assets. But at that time, it sounded like, okay, well, it's not being maintained, but Counterparty at that time was kind of pretty popular. I wasn't there, but that's what I've been told, kind of talking to Adam Levine, Tatiana. They had these kind of choices of like, oh, should I go with Mastercoin or should we go with Counterparty? And they ended up choosing Counterparty. So you're kind of, you have a lot of tooling invested. You've registered some names on Counterparty. What was like popular at that time? I know, were you listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin at the time? Were you kind of like, what was like cool in those early days, 2014, 2015 on Counterparty?
I was still, Let's Talk Bitcoin, Tokenly, Devon Weller was just an incredible coder, but just much like me, he was just building just for building's sake. He was like, oh, this is cool. Let's see what we can build. And so I came into the space, and we, Tokenly and Devon and Adam and I had some, we were always friendly with each other, but we kind of saw each other a little bit as because we were kind of competing for some of the same market space and stuff. So I didn't really get into too much of what Adam Levine and whatnot was doing, although they were definitely there before me. When I showed up, I think they already had like token controlled access stuff working, and Tatiana Coin, and some really cool experiments. I can't remember anything in particular from that time that was really, really cool. It was just lots of experimenting. A few years later, Tokenly got some funding, and they wrote swap bots, which are essentially like vending machines. And I was running this too, that allowed you to a centralized, that allowed people to send funds to an address, and then set up how you wanted to sell your token for Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, other coins. We all were kind of just experimenting around with what can you do? How can you use these tokens to enable new cool functionality?
So that's interesting. That's kind of, I don't think that's be well known to most of the public, is that you kind of already, Adam with Tokenly and then you with CoinDaddy was already setting up this dispenser type vending machine option that, it wasn't on a protocol level yet, but it was already being experimented with by using some tooling outside the protocol itself.
Yeah. It was well, because using Bitcoin on the DEX is kind of clunky. Using the decentralized exchange on Dogeparty and Counterparty with XCP, the native token, is awesome. Like, it's a really great experience. You just set your order and it auto matches and whatnot. But using Bitcoin, it's kind of a pain in the butt, because you needed to like place your order and then leave your wallet open. The system would match, and then you had like 20 blocks to send your Bitcoin automatically. And so it was just really, because you can't escrow Bitcoin, natively in a trustless way. So we were experimenting around with other ways to like get Bitcoin, swap Bitcoin for tokens and for tokens. So they were very early dispenser experiments.
And I remember, because I feel like it would have been the thesis in those days, because when I came in and started messing around with trading and exchanges, everything was denoted into Bitcoin. You'd go to Poloniex, and I think I remember some USD markets, but it was mostly to Bitcoin. So I find that interesting. What that BTC, I think it's called BTC Pay, even though it's not associated with the BTC Pay company at all. Is that considered a partially signed Bitcoin transaction, that old way of doing it that's kind of clunky? Or am I misinterpreting that?
No, that's just the name. Like every function in Counterparty has a unique name, like order or dispenser or whatnot. And BTC Pay was just a special message type that was only used when you would place an order, and then your order would, like, you place an order to sell something, or excuse me, to buy something with Bitcoin, and then the counterparty would match your order with somebody trying to sell for Bitcoin, and you would get like a notification saying, hey, you have X number of blocks to send this BTC payment. And so that's what they called it, BTC Pay, because it was just a way to pay for the order match. But it wasn't related to the company. And I think it's worth mentioning too, there was a really early on, there was a company called Vend, VENND, and they essentially were a company that allowed you to swap Bitcoin for, I think it was XBTC, which was a native counterparty token. And so you could like just go to them, swap your Bitcoin for XBTC, and then use the DEX in a really like fire and forget it order type way. But then they kind of shut down when they figured out that, oh crap, this makes us a money exchange business, and we'll have to get licensed in all 50 states and stuff.
So let's talk about that. So people are experimenting with making these tokens on top of Bitcoin transactions, and as we've heard before, Dogeparty transactions. But just focusing on Bitcoin transactions, like what was the kind of regulation? I mean, I kind of asked this to Adam Levine. I mean, were you guys always jumping through hoops? Were you guys scared that there wasn't enough, accurate laws put in? Like, were you guys? I feel like there was this kind of overarching pressure that what you guys were experimenting with was almost like not even, it was the Wild West, not regulated yet, not really like, I think maybe still to this day it's like that. But what was that like? Is it still like that? Do you feel like there's not enough kind of really simple laws to make this just easy to do and have builders build and wallet providers create tooling, etc.?
Yeah, it's getting more clear. But yeah, it was very clear early on that there was no real guidance, and that if you look at like the letter of the law, almost every, it was not clear. It was clear that you could get into some deep trouble if you didn't do things exactly right, and a lot of it was up for interpretation. I was fortunate enough in that my wife at the time was a corporate compliance officer for, funny enough, JP Morgan Chase. And so, I would consult her and say like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. I have this CoinDaddy service where I'm, for $5 somebody can register a token, but I want to make sure I do things, the right way. How do I stay out of, not being a money service business, not being a money issuer, and so yeah, I got some guidance from her based off of current laws at the time. Like for instance, when you issued a token on CoinDaddy, I just issue the name and transfer ownership to the person. I could have very easily said, oh, how many coins do you want to issue? Oh, you want to issue 5,000 coin, hippy happy coins and transfer them to you? I could have done that, but that would make me a money exchange, or a money transmitter or something rather. So it was like, there was not much guide. Really had to try to figure out, okay, what actions do I need to avoid so that it can't be interpreted as, a currency converter, taking Bitcoin and issuing something else. Luckily, registering a token name, just the asset ownership kind of flew under the radar and didn't really get any no regulation enforcement.
I find that's incredibly interesting. I don't think a lot of people nowadays that kind of are messing with runes and ordinals and Ethereum NFTs, I don't think they're really aware of what asset issuance ownership means on Counterparty and Dogeparty. I find that interesting that this kind of protocol level experimentation of how it was laid out became that like framework for like, no, you issued it, it is yours, your responsibility, etc. I find that interesting. It's like how the protocol mixes with social standards.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Counterparty, you've seen other people do stuff, you've got this tooling set up. It's kind of morphed into Xchain, and Xchain has become this block explorer. I believe at the time there was like block scan, right? I think it was called.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Matthew Tan, he was running. There were two explorers. I showed up. There was already a Counterparty explorer. It was block scan. Go ahead.
No, you mentioned Matthew Tan. I don't think people realize that the guy who made the original Counterparty Block Explorer is the creator of EtherScan.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. It was the same code base. He just tweaked it for Ethereum. Yeah, it was almost exactly the same. And then eventually, when Xchain was around, he was like, "Look, I'm gonna," he reached out to me. He was like, "Look, I'm gonna pivot and I'm going to shut this Explorer down now that you're running one. He didn't shut it down because of me. He shut it down because he was focused on Ethereum, and rightly so at the time because it was a bigger market. But he was had some scaling problems too. Like his Explorer ran directly querying the Counterparty database, and it's a SQLite database, and there at the time there weren't any indexes in. So what I'm getting at is it's fine for like 1 or 2 requests, but it would not scale. And so when I wrote my Explorer, I wrote Counterparty to MySQL, which essentially talks to the Counterparty API, sucks the data and transactions out of Counterparty, and puts them into a MySQL database, and adds some indexes to it to make things run significantly faster. And so I was able to run, scale pretty up to many more transactions. And so for him, it was like, well, this is always kind of a pain in the ass, and he kind of wanted to move on to, being the Ethereum Explorer.
So to this day, I think you've released some data of how many queries you get on. It's now called TokenScan, but for many years it was called Xchain. So at that point, BlockScan kind of gets discontinued. And was that kind of the main Counterparty Explorer? I mean, I think it still is to this day, right? I mean, that same kind of, I don't see many people. There's other Explorers out there that are really cool, really interesting, but it still seems that Xchain that now turns into TokenScan is kind of the main thing. Was that kind of apparent when BlockScan went down? Did you see the data roll in of like, wow, a lot of people are using this now?
Yeah, well, it was already kind of clear. Like most people were using, the Explorer, and then there are other Explorers out there, and even more in the last 6 months or 9 months or so. But generally, those Explorers were kind of just focused on their projects. They weren't really kind of a universal showing all the transactions. They would and like DigiRare and stuff. It's great, but it doesn't. I mean, it shows you some of the stuff that they want to show you. It doesn't really show like everything. So yeah, TokenScan and Xchain were just Explorers that show every function on Counterparty.
And it's been so useful. I know when I came into the space, everyone told me, go to FreeWallet, go to Xchain, and understand. That's how I understood Counterparty when I first got there. So DigiRare? I know what was. I'm not even aware of this. What was it? Was that a block explorer for some sort of project, or?
I think it might still be up. It was written by Droplister. Droplister's been around for a long time too, and he's written a couple different explorers. He wrote one that was really cool called I think XCP Fox. Which really dove into like a lot. Xchain shows like the raw data and transactions, but his XCP Fox really dove into like the statistics of how many transactions and how much money was flowing through the system. And I wanted to get on my Explorer, but just never got around to and had time to do. And then he also wrote xcp.io, which is I believe up now. So there's been a few Explorers over the years.
Cool. Yeah, I really love xcp.io, and I'm going to be talking with Dan in a few days too, so I'll bring that up.
Great.
Mark that down on the list. So getting back to let's talk about your introduction into kind of like getting involved in the developer world of Counterparty. When I did some research, I looked at kind of the early Counterparty improvement proposals, CIPs, and I saw your name on a bunch of things like the Subasset upgrade and some earlier things. What was that transition to kind of show up to Counterparty, build a block explorer, and then start to get really intertwined and participating and getting involved with the Counterparty GitHub? What was those early processes like?
Well, like I said earlier, I didn't really code Python at the time, and I didn't really, I didn't really have an interest in being a protocol level developer. I was just kind of a guy who ran, some sites and allowed people to see what was going on. I went and got on the because I was running a whole bunch of stuff. I had some community support. So at the time, I think I got on. There's like 1 or 2 years I was on the Counterparty Foundation. And that's where I work closely with Devin, and there was just a lot more talk and experimentation about like, hey, how could we do what can we do with this next? Like these features are great, but what else can we do? And Subassets were one of those things. I think there were a few different proposed implementations for Subassets. Joe Looney came up with one, was like you could issue a numeric asset and then using some hash function or some, I don't remember. You can dig and find out his implementation, but it wasn't done on a protocol level. And I was like, well, I really think this should be done on a protocol level where it's clear like what is and is not officially a token. And so I put forth the Subassets proposal, and there was some drama over which way the assets should go, more specific to less specific, or vice versa. And Drop Lister and I tussled over that for a little while, and we were both passionate about it.
Yeah, tell me about that like environment early. So this is 20. I have to look at the exact year. I could pull up the timeline. I did, but so there's every single upgrade in Counterparty was always kind of contested, right? The sub assets we know now, people wouldn't know that a lot of people argued about it many years
ago,
right?
No, Counterparty has always had drama because it has smart people and strong personalities, and lots of people feel that their opinion is the right one, including myself. And even though we can be cordial and discuss things, sometimes feelings get hurt, and so yeah, it's always had some kind of drama. And Drop Lister and I we're cool now, but like we butted heads a good amount back in the day. And when I was on the foundation, like there was fees were going crazy, Bitcoin fees were going crazy, and I think Devon Weller was the core developer at the time, and he'd floated an idea of like, hey, these fees are too expensive. We don't want to play a couple bucks. Let's put it on. Let's move Counterparty to Litecoin. And I was like, no, like the whole value proposition of Counterparty is being on the strongest chain. Like I wouldn't support it, but we talked about it and ran through possible ways that could be implemented in one of the foundation meetings. And then one of the foundation members, who was Dante, he was friends with Dan, and so he kind of leaked this document to Dan, and then Dan got it in his head like, hey, these guys are trying to move Counterparty. And so he like created some videos, like 4 or 5 videos, where he was just talking nonstop about J-Dog's horrible, he's trying to move Counterparty and whatnot. So there's always been Counterparty drama.
Yeah, and I find that funny too, because it's not really that far-fetched of an idea when you have Counterparty already forked into Doge, right? And the idea to fork it into Litecoin. When I came into the space, it was that 2018 Roger Ver Bitcoin Cash split, and the fees were going up, and I was like, well, how can I sell my rare Pepe Breitbart Pep for a couple dollars if people have to pay $20 to buy it? And I remember I hit up Joe Looney I can probably bring it up, and I hit up Joe Looney in the messages like, any way we can get this on Bitcoin Cash, man? I feel like it'd really help.
Yeah, there's a difference between forking the software to like start a new ledger and then moving ledgers. Moving ledgers is a big no-no, or forking a ledger is generally worst case scenario,
like into a new cryptocurrency itself.
Right.
I would assume the coding is super complicated if you do that. I probably even have to rewrite some stuff, I bet. Although Litecoin,
you just have to tweak some stuff to for Dogeparty, it was just tweak some stuff to opt Doge part or Dogecoin chain. But for BSV, it would have been pretty simple to move. But nobody really. There was a guy, Julian, with a company called Block Freight, and he at the time. And funny enough, this is all at the same time when all of the kind of Drop Lister drama and me and Foundation was going. Devin was the main developer. He saw all this backlash, and so he kind of said, well, I'm not really interested in working on Counterparty anymore. And I could be remembering this wrong because it's been so many years ago. But then Julian came forward and was like, oh, well, I'm going to start up Counterparty Cash. And that website, I believe, is still up, counterparty.cash. And I'm going to fork the ledger. So now you're going to have rare Pepes on one chain and rare Pepes on Bitcoin Cash. And Devin kind of stepped forward and was like, well, I'm not working on Counterparty anymore, so I'd be interested in possibly doing that and getting paid for doing that. And I think I don't want to say it was Drop Lister because I'm not sure, but I think there were some legal threats made that were like, if you do this, we're going to sue the hell out of you. And so then Devin that was kind of his exit from the space. He's like, okay, this is enough drama for me. I'm out.
Oh my God. So yeah, there's a lot of more recent people, me and even more recent people that talk about drama, but those days, I mean, there's a Counterparty Foundation. And I guess before I ask you that, I want to ask about kind of this change that I read about from Counterparty improvement proposals, which were like these kind of, people would write abstracts or some sort of the process looked like something you'd see in a journal, right? It would be a motive and an abstract and et cetera, and like some really deep implementation. And okay, now let's discuss it. And then the Counterparty developers started doing these things called bounties, where they tried to raise enough money to then pay for the coding time to implement this stuff. What like, what was that process like? What did you kind of agree with that bounty system? Did you feel like people weren't coding because there was no incentive to do so, or did you like the bounty system?
Yeah, it was proposed by who's the original co-founder, and back in those days, and I still am on good terms with Robbie. I like him a lot. He's the one co-founder that stuck around when everyone else kind of bailed. He kept it alive, and was really supportive. And he eventually is the one that kind of handed over all the domains and everything to me, because I was the only one generally left around running stuff. But yeah, he proposed a bounty system, because yes, the counterparty improvement proposals was essentially, we talk about ideas and propose them on the forums, kind of hammer out like, oh, well, sub assets this way or sub assets that way. And then a person would write up their proposal in kind of a, high level or even a lower level, and say, hey, this is exactly how it will get implemented, and then put it forth to the CIP editor, and the CIP editor would approve it or did, and move it into approved or a draft or whatever. And then once there was generally consensus from the community, and consensus is tough, fine. All you need is a couple loud voices saying no, and you can't move anything forward. But generally, once a proposal was made, and the community's consensus was like, okay, yeah, this is an improvement. We kind of want this. Then there would be an address assigned to that specific bounty, and the developer would say, like, look, I think it's going to take X amount of time, and I'd like, here's the milestones that I'll hit, and I'd like to get paid X amount on these milestones. And then there was a CIP custodian who'd the community would fund those proposals, and then once it was fully funded, the developer would start work, and when you hit the milestones, you'd get paid, and then when it was actually proven to be working and tested and implemented into the protocol, then you get the final payment.
I really enjoyed it. It's something I've talked about with Zero G. You did a really informative interview with him a couple months ago, and I watched it a few times. I included some of your clips into this documentary I put in TimeLineXCP. But he said a quote that it kind of stuck with me, and it was the whole idea of counterparty improvement proposals was like a love letter to Bitcoin, because it was similar to the Bitcoin improvement proposals, or BIPs. And I always thought that was such an interesting thing, that counterparty is like this love letter to Bitcoin of like, hey, we want to do it like you guys do it, right? And I said on the Emblem Vault space that the Bitcoin GitHub is the valley of the shadow of death, and it's terrifying place to be. I didn't know what AN or ACK meant, ACK or AN. I didn't know. And if you go there, even to these days, it's crazy. And you see some of that culturally in some of the Pepe cards, Luke Jr. And so I guess let's touch on that, right? There was this big debate in the Bitcoin GitHub world about the OP return function. And that's what Counterparty uses. And they started off with 40 bytes. And when it got raised to 80 bytes, it was a big announcement on the Counterparty website. Do you know anything about that, or like what that process was? Was because people were saying Counterparty spamming the chain, and it's yeah. What was that like?
Well, again, that kind of happened a little bit before I arrived, a few months before I arrived. But yeah, it was 40 bytes, and it was raised to 80. I don't recall if it was 40 and then raised to 80, or if it was 80 and then dropped to 40. But yeah, there was Counterparty was using op return, and then the Luke Dash Jr. and some other people kind of were like, hey, that's spam, you can't do that, Bitcoin's only for value transfers, it's not for experimentation and whatnot. And so they essentially they lowered the limit, or either they lowered it from 80 to 40 bytes, or they refused to raise it. And if you go back into archive.org, there's all the old Counterparty articles. I have them on counterpartyclassic.io too, but I don't want to send people there right now. So anyway, there was I think it was called an open letter to the Bitcoin developers. And it was essentially I think Adam wrote it, or Robbie wrote it. It was essentially like pleading the case, like, hey, look, we're paying the transaction fees, we should be able to do whatever the heck we want and whatnot. And, it kind of fell on deaf ears. And so then they had to, write multi-sig. With the argument was, this is the most efficient way to write data to the blockchain, because it can be pruned and whatnot. And when kind of fell on deaf ears, then they had to write multi-sig, which is a way nastier way to do things. It's more expensive, but it writes data into a whole bunch of outputs. And so it was kind of like a middle finger to the Bitcoin developers, like, hey, we're asking nicely for you to let us do this the nice way, but fuck you. We don't have to ask permission. There's no way you can stop us. Like there's multiple encoding methods, and we can do what we want. Go ahead.
I find that so interesting, though, this kind of like, hey, we're going to ask for permission, and then now we're going to ask for forgiveness, because that was a big ethos of like the more recent stuff, like stamps and ordinals, of just like, well, we have Taproot now, so we could just spam it, double middle fingers up, see what are you going to do about it type. And I don't think people realize that kind of Counterparty was like the first instance of that, of just like, what the hell are you going to do?
Yeah, you can just Google op return wars, and there's some articles written about it.
Okay, so let's move along the timeline. There's a lot. It's actually, I'm trying to I feel like if I asked you every single tiny thing, we'd be here for like 6 hours. So I might gloss over some stuff, because there's a lot of history that happened in the early years. But so you're now integrated, and you're involved in the discussions in the Counterparty forums. You've written a CIP, Subassets. How long did that take to finally get integrated into the protocol when you wrote it? And what was that like?
Well, I was just, like I said, I was just the idea guy, saying, hey, this is how it should be implemented. I believe at that time, John Villar had already kind of showed up and cut his teeth on the Counterparty code base. And like I said, all the other co-founders Robbie was still around, but he was busy with business, and he was minimally involved. And so at that time, John Villar was the main developer, I believe. Right after Devin left, John was like, okay, well, I'll step into this role. And so John and I developed a really good friendship, chatted, every day, all day for like 5 years, and really tag teamed a lot of this stuff. So where I'd come up with an idea and he'd refine it, or he'd come up with an idea and we'd, tag team back and forth until it got it into a Counterparty improvement proposal. And that's where the Spencers came from.
Yeah. And that's where, and again, I'm just kind of letting people know we're glossing over an incredible amount of history, because by this time you had Rare Pepe, Spells of Genesis, Force of Will. You had these big trading card games. You had this invitation curated art collection that had never been done before. And it was wrapped around this highly political meme called Pepe. And so a lot of people were, there was a lot going on in there. But tell me a little bit about John Villar. If people don't know, John Villar is an extremely respected individual from those days, and was the lead developer at the time after Devin left and gave it up to John Villar. But and that's when I came into Counterparty, that's what I saw. I saw he went by, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Shigalter or something like that.
Chigarator.
I didn't even know you pronounced it like that. Yeah, tell me about how did you meet him, and what was he like? And
I met him kind of just the same way I met Joe Looney. Like, I was in the space and running stuff, and Joe kind of showed up and asked some questions, and I was like, who's this guy? Like, I answered his questions and stuff, and then we kind of became friends for a while. Same thing with John. Like, John showed up and he actually wrote a simpler version of my asset management or asset enhancement service. And eventually I wasn't threatened by it, but I was like, hey, I offer a similar service. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm not trying to step on your toes. I'll shut that down. I was like, no, you don't have to do that. But it kind of showed the character of John. Like, he was really there to experiment and support everybody around him. I never saw him get mad or upset at anyone. He always had time to talk technical or explain things to anyone. He was a genius. I mean, he was next level stuff. Like, we did a lot of projects together that lots of people don't know about. We forked Counterparty over to Dash. We created Dash.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, him and I were like, oh, okay. Well, we're Counterparty's okay. This is our love, but we're not earning much off of it. We got to eat. So how about we fork it over to Dash? And at the time, Mike, we were at this time, Rare Pepe had already been, established, and we had a Rare Pepe scientist chat where all 5 of us would kind of chat all day long. And Mike was really into Dash. Like, he was like, oh, Bitcoin's kind of dead. Like, I'm on Dash and staking and stuff. So we were like, all right. He kept telling us, oh, they got money. We'd poke fun at him, like, yeah, Dash, okay. But when it came time to figure out, okay, well, what can we do to earn some money? We went and we're like, okay, we'll fork Counterparty to Dash, and it's actually still out there. The repo is out there. We, much like the way Counterparty was launched, we write it first, prove it's working, get everything going, and then then worry about getting paid. And so we wrote it all, got it working. I had Dash party.xchain.io. And then we, let the Dash community know about it, and then put forth a proposal saying, hey, this is what we'd like to earn for, for this. And it just, the master nodes, never got around to voting. Like, they didn't vote yes on it or whatnot. So, after like 6 months or so, we shut it down. But yeah, we've worked it over to Dash. We also did a project called Burr, which was kind of making fun of the liquidity pools and stuff. Where you could create, like, you could, this was when all the liquidity were going crazy. And, like, oh, well, if you stake this coin, then you get 4,000% APR. And, and so we kind of created a project to make fun of it. It was burr.farm. And it was basically a money printer, and you could just make the print burr faster or slower. So, and you could stake your burr and make the money printer go faster or slower. We wrote up a white paper, which was just, essentially the word burr over 1,000 times and translated it into Russian, because, everybody was releasing their liquidity pools and think, oh, this has been audited and this is great. And, people are getting scammed left and right. So we kind of poked fun at that. Like, wrote a white paper saying, oh, this is totally safe, burr, 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 and put it in Russian. And so, yeah, John and I, we did lots of fun stuff over the years.
Man,
we always lost money on that stuff, but it didn't really matter. It was more about having fun.
That's hilarious, because I remember, because like that same perspective of me kind of being like, well, can we put it on Bitcoin Cash? It was, from my perspective, Dash was like this, well, like low fee, really quick, you're not paying that much, because the entire ethos of Bitcoin was like, it's too expensive to use now because of all of this, block, what is it? The, Roger Ver Bitcoin Cash, that whole fork and
Yeah.
et cetera. That's so interesting to me. I might pick your brain about that later in time. That's interesting. But around this time, so John Villar is the lead developer. Most of the main creators of Counterparty have kind of left, and it's kind of you, John Villar, Joe Looney, Dan Anderson. There's kind of this core people left, and you eventually made a wallet called FreeWallet, which is still live today, freewallet.io, and it's still the most used wallet in Counterparty to this day. It includes all these incredible features. It has this really cool, like, hopefully don't take this the wrong way. It's actually a compliment, in my opinion, that I feel like I'm playing Roller Coaster Tycoon when I go in my free wallet. Because do you know what I mean though? Because I just was like, yeah. I grew up on that, so I was like, I feel like, all my data is there, and I can click things, and it does it all, and.
Yeah, people have very, very strong opinions on whether they like or hate Wally the wallet. Like, this, are you serious? I'm going to put my Bitcoin in tokens worth, thousands of dollars in this smiley face wallet looking thing? What the heck are you talking about? But you got to remember, we were all there just to have fun. And so, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I wrote FreeWallet. It was a process though, because I mean, when I first started using CounterWallet and Doge Wallet, like, that's a horrible way to interact with the platform. Like, it was capable of so much more. I had these Explorer, you had icons and images and sound, music and stuff that you could see on the Explorer, but you couldn't see it in the wallet. And I was like, I want to be able to see what I have in my wallet, not just some square that says boob coin or whatever. So yeah, I had to write the Explorer, and before I could write the Explorer, well, to write the wallet, you have to have APIs to pull the data. Before you have APIs to pull the data, you have to have an Explorer. Before you can have the Explorer, you got to have the data out of Counterparty in an optimized way. So it was like a process of, I think, about a year and a half of writing Counterparty to MySQL, writing Xchain, writing the APIs to pull data, and then I was like, okay, now I have everything that I need to actually write a wallet. And so I wrote, FreeWallet originally in this Sencha Touch language and put it on Android and iPhone, but it was an old, outdated toolkit, and so eventually I moved to writing it wrote the desktop wallet, because they can do a lot more on desktop than you can in mobile. There's a lot more real estate to work with. So that's kind of why I wrote the wallet, just because I wanted to be able to, if I own something. And Joe Loney was kind of playing with this concept at the time too. Like, if you own it, when he wrote Rare Pepe wallet, there were some tokens that would, all the tokens would show the image, which was great. But there were some tokens that had additional content. Like John Villar wrote Pepe Vault, which is a game. It's a card, but it also had an embedded game. And so I really like that concept of like, oh, well, there's a token, but you can like view the token in your wallet, but you can also like play the game or, you know, hear the music that's associated with it. And so that's kind of why I wrote FreeWallet. Was kind of a general purpose, not just focused on rare Pepe, but a general purpose counterparty wallet, just like the general purpose Xchain Explorer.
Well, I think I really do speak for everybody in the community to say thank you for Xchain. It's now called TokenScan, but Xchain at that time, and FreeWallet, because it still is this just foundation for using Counterparty to this day. So I just found it incredible. And I used to use Counterwallet, and then when I found FreeWallet, I was like, oh my fucking God, it's so much easier. Oh my God. And yeah, all those experimentations you talked about earlier, again, I think it's just talking with you and your story. I hope people like go back, look into my in my pin message. I wrote this huge timeline for all of these absolute incredible experimentations that happen. Pepe Ball is one of them, where it's an entire game inside of a token, and you can only really access it if you had the token, and you go to the wallet and unlock it, and then play the Pepe Ball game. And that's what we talked about in our previous conversation with Rare Skrilla and DJ Pepe. And man, I just got to talk with Adam B. Levine about some of the token access control he did with Let's Talk Bitcoin. And so that was interesting. I mean, around that time, people were talking about, you know, tokens that could like entry you into a concert, right? And you'd have the tickets still. And
oh yeah, there was lots of experiments. There was actually, I can't remember the name of the token, but I'm sure somebody in the community will be able to dig it up. But there was actually a Vegas strip club that it was like they put out a token, which was like VIP. The premise behind it was like, hey, you buy this token for a few $1,000s, and you always get access to the VIP back room and whatnot. So there was all sorts of like experimentation of what can you do with these tokens. Yeah, you can sell them, but can you like put them on a phone and scan them as an entry to a ticket to, you know, to an event and whatnot. It was kind of the Wild West of what you could do. Some ideas were awesome and some were not. It was really a great time to see people playing around.
Man, I would love to write that about that. I would love to know about that token. That seems like it should go in the timeline of a token that could get you into the back room of the strip club. Highly historical, highly influential, was used 69 times at the time, you know, like that's interesting to me, because I remember some people were making like bars and you could pay in Pepe. I think Dana was the person who did that. Some other people kind of had some ideas, but it was pretty. It wasn't entirely supported, and not a lot of those lasted long, but some to this day really did last all the way until the present.
Yeah, there was another guy that did coffee. Like he had I believe he had a plantation, and he used the token to like, hey, I'll sell you this token. It was essentially shares in the company, but it was like, hey, I'll sell you this token, and the token will allow me to plant out of coffee or rice or whatever it was. And then every quarter, like when he made profits, he would come back and like pay people out dividends for a number of years, for like 3 or 4 years. So that's another little nugget that's hidden in Counterparty somewhere. I can't remember the name of the token, but it's pretty exciting.
Why do you got to keep telling me about these new historic tokens when I've already researched 100? Why do you got to do this to me? It's every time I find something new, it's like, well, actually, there's like 5, 6, 7, 200 other things that you should look into. But they're really slept on, I think, on Counterparty. I heard rumors, all right, and I haven't really gotten too much documentation. I looked up overstock.com, and they did a fork of Counterparty, and they kind of tried to incorporate their online marketing, or their kind of Overstock, you know, sold a lot of products. They were kind of early Amazon type, you know.
Yeah, the Medici project.
Yeah, and so instead of going into kind of like Medici and what they tried, and because looking back, that our timing was a little off with the whole Bitcoin fees, right? I think a lot of projects got killed with that high Bitcoin fees, or at least dormant at that time. But are you aware of them putting stock in their company in a P token? I've kind of heard rumors.
I'm not. I know when I came back, the co-founders were all kind of still around, but they were announced like we're going to go to partner with Overstock, and I believe they got hired or they buy them for a little while, but it pretty quickly within a few months clear like they had different visions for how to run things, and so they parted ways, and that's right around the same time that Symbiont, the Symbiont was a company that was, you know, the rest of the founders kind of left and started and kind of took their Counterparty code private and added some additional features. And Adam Krellenstein will be able to give you that information. I don't know anything about that, really.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to book an interview with him too. That would be really interesting to get his perspective on the early days. Because in my research, it feels like a lot of the for-profit companies around Counterparty didn't really work out. Some of them did, you know, and I think case in point was probably like Spells of Genesis, but they were also offering these collectibles, right? And it's even funnier to me that like the non-profit things, Rare Pepe and like JP Jansen's experiments, are now considered kind of like they lived, right, for like throughout. That's incredibly interesting to me. So it's like, if people don't realize, Counterparty is like this really open source ethos, you know, everything's public, protocol's public, the discussions are public, everything's public, even the transactions themselves are public. So I just find it incredibly like an interesting theory. I think people might look back on that. I might start rambling here, so feel free to cut me off, but I find that interesting that now people look back and look at that open source and they kind of make fun of it. It's like, well, what do you mean you weren't there for profit? What do you mean you guys argued about consensus? Like what? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, but really looking back, it's like a respectable thing that kept living and that people were creating things around that. I want to jump back something though with the mobile version. The mobile version is something, and you know me because I've gotten pretty involved with FreeWallet and I gotten pretty involved with the GitHub, and there's something you kind of keep mentioning to me that I've grown a deeper understanding and for when I looked into Christian Moss, Book of Orbs, Saratobi's Island. There was just these incredible laws you couldn't break, and these, you know, pages and pages of terms and condition rules for the Apple Store and Google Play that you had to adhere to. Was that was that like a contributing factor of why you started to really build out FreeWallet desktop instead of mobile?
Not necessarily, because there's I really had no problems getting the wallet in. Well, Apple by this time had lots of apps, so their reviewers were not really going in depth and like figuring out what the hell the wallets were. So the wallet itself, FreeWallet itself, if you just downloaded it and opened it up, it just Bitcoin. Like you create a new wallet, it shows some Bitcoin, you some Bitcoin to it, it shows up. So to them, it just looked like a normal Bitcoin wallet. And they never really dug into like the issue. They never issued any tokens or like created a counterparty wallet and plugged in a 12-word passphrase that, you know, had assets in it. And then like, oh my God, look at all these rare Pepes and all these things that are showing up. So I flew under the radar in that regard, that they were lazy on not really paying attention to it, except for it being like a Bitcoin wallet. But even with it just being a Bitcoin wallet, they wanted to make sure that they got their VIG, and that like I had a donate button in there. That was like, hey, I built this thing, you know, here on the about page, like just like I do in FreeWallet, like a donate button, and you know, it would just pull up this send screen with my, you know, predefined donation address in there, and they had real issues with that. They were like, nope, all money needs to go through us. You can't have a donate button. They kicked it out of the App Store. Like, no, you gotta not do that. But again, they didn't really test all that well.
So they had beef with you for the donate button, but they didn't care about the rare Pepes they were holding.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, you guys aren't paying attention anyway. So fine, the donate button disappears. But as soon as you have an X token in the wallet, the donate button reappears. So it was like, it was always kind of a cat and mouse game with them. Christian did a lot more, you know, cat and mouse game with them, and Spells of Genesis too. Like I remember so many times that Shaban was like, oh my God, this freaking Apple Store, and they had to like try to get around it by building an app, which was essentially a browser, and then being able to load content from their website into the app, and in order to kind of like hide it from App Store. So it was definitely a lot of cat and mouse back in the day.
I miss Book of Orbs so much. I loved that UI, and I learned some things that like Rare Pepe used to have a password protect on Book of Orbs because they thought Rare Pepes were kind of edgy, you know, or like, and that you couldn't see them unless you had the I didn't know that. I think I showed up after that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Another little rare known fact about Spells of Genesis was, I mean, I was around for their funding, like when they were playing around and put forth the idea, and then they actually did an ICO, and I was one of the key holders. I think there was like three or four people that were like back in 2014, 2015 that were the key holders, essentially the people that could say, okay, well, you've met much like the counterparty improvement proposal. Okay, you've met this milestone. Now Bitcoin can be released to you. And I don't remember how much they raised or whatnot, but yeah, Shaban and I worked closely together for a little while to like, okay, this is done. Give me funds. And we're like, okay, I sign on the multi-signature to release more funds to you.
Damn. Yeah. And at that time, there was a lot of, I mean, again, I just can't stress enough to listeners or viewers or anybody that's listening to this, how different that space was, because the counterparty tokens, and the only way I can relate it to these like people that are here nowadays is it was kind of, it's not the same thing at all, but it felt like kind of pump.fun of people were making these tokens on Counterparty with the intent of like, I'm gonna get it on Poloniex, which would nowadays be like, I'm getting it on Binance, you know, and they were pushing for that whole thing, and so but you know, pushing away kind of the whole idea of trying to pump into something. The people that were doing it legit had these tokens, Pepe Cash, Bit Crystals, right? These tokens that kind of represented some usage within their environment and such. Anyway, I might be rambling on the side of things, but I want to get into, because you talked about, you know, your Block Explorer and FreeWallet starting to show a lot more information, like for instance, Pepe Vault. I know I might be jumping forward a little bit in time, but I just want us to talk about CIP25, or this kind of this like standardized way that people could start linking YouTube videos or SoundCloud songs, or, you know, images or data, and how CIP25 was kind of written in your eyes. What the purpose for it was.
Sure. Well, there was always a spec that was written by the founders where you could create some JSON file and they would allow you to specify an image, which was just the 48 by 48 icon, a website, a PGP signature, and a description. And then over the years, you know, people started cramming, you know, HTML in the description, or, you know, it was clear like people wanted to do more stuff with, you know, put more information in the JSON, but nothing was kind of official. But since I ran the Explorer, you know, it was pretty easy to, you know, somebody would, I think it was, I don't know if I want to attribute this to Joe, but I think it is. I'm pretty sure it was Joe, who did create a token, and you would upload your image to Imager, and, you know, in some special format, you type like Imager / like the code, and the image would load in his wallet. I can't remember which wallet, he's written a couple. And so, you know, he's like, hey, can you update the Explorer to show this? Like, this text is in a predefined format. Like, here's how you decode it. Like, if it's Imager, you just go to imager.com. This code is the image, and, you know, so it was no problem to, like, you know, it's a couple lines of code to like decode that and show the image. And then people like were able to create larger images and upload them to Imager, and then update the token description to point to those. That went on for, you know, a few years, where it was like just custom asset description stuff, like an IPFS semicolon, and then transaction hash. You decode that, and you can, you know, request the IPFS file, and if it's an image, you load it. So I would already done kind of like a lot of unofficial hacks to the Explorer to like allow experimenting and loading of stuff. So CIP25 was just kind of, all right, we already have all these special predefined formats, and I don't want to just keep adding on a format for every new thing. So let's kind of update this. You know, it's been like 8-9 years. Let's update this JSON file in a more standardized way to like load a whole bunch of stuff. Like, you can load audio files, images, you know. In my oh yeah, I should mention that. In my asset enhancement service, I had come up with a way to just enter additional information, like social media, websites, addresses, and whatnot. And then, because I ran the Explorer, I updated my Explorer to show that information as well. So I already kind of had a standard written like many years ago to show this information. And so rather than keep doing hacks or using my wonky standard, I decided to write CIP25, which is just a standardized way of putting data into a JSON file, so that you can iterate through it, and other websites can take advantage of, oh, here's how you decode this information and display it, rather than it just being something that was kind of just limited to Xchain.
And that CIP25 never really got kind of implemented on a protocol level, but it did get implemented in your Explorer, which is the main Explorer everyone used. It got implemented in your wallet, which is the main wallet everyone used. And so it kind of felt like it got implemented into the system. I remember looking back and seeing CIP25 thinking like, oh, I thought this was protocol level, but then I realized, no, it was just kind of an idea that they put forth, or you put forth specifically on how do you explain things.
Yeah, just standardizing the fields, so that when you parse it in, you know website is this and image is that and whatnot.
So so this is more of a question of like, kind of, I want you to reflect a little bit and give me your kind of interpretation of it. A lot of when I did my work of looking back on Counterparty and looking at, what we call now historic NFTs in the modern lens of the world or the crypto world right now, people are looking back on like what was on chain. And we're looking at JP Jansen's Olga 1 out of 1. He did, base 64 on a broadcast. So it's considered on chain, and people started doing that more. And I felt like in my research, a lot of these underappreciated tokens didn't necessarily do things at a protocol level, do things necessarily like in a size way, but we're breaking the limits of what was possible at the time. What's your take on like this kind of like modern or contemporary idea that everything needs to be on chain and everything needs to be accessible? Like, what's your take on like the whole thesis of Counterparty was like, hey, we can't save all of our data in 40 or 80 bytes. So why would we try? Why not link to something else and then have the token represent something theoretical? Do you still feel like that's very worthwhile, or do you think this on-chain meta is the way to go?
I personally am not a fan of on-chain meta. Like, there's some arguments to be made. Like, yes, it should be permanent, and you can store the image or whatnot on chain, and it's there forever. But there are cases where people point to JSON files to images, and the websites go down and the images disappear. So I mean, I can see both sides. There is a value in having the data backed up, but I don't feel like everything has to be on chain, and I'm especially not a fan of every change having to be on chain. Like, if you want to go in and like, oh crap, I misspelled this word in my token description, I updated my website and I went people to this new contact page. I feel like it makes more sense to have a token that points to a JSON file, which you can edit and update with information at any time, without having to pay an on-chain fee to like store that data. So me personally, I don't really see the value in it, in having everything stored on chain.
Yeah, in the process, I've been messing around with Counterparty since 2017, and here we are, almost 8 years later, 7 years later ish. And with this project I did for TimeLineXCP, I was like, okay, I want to use the description field and like link this kind of iframe to go show all of my research in a cool interactive way. Then I want to add my image, and now I want to put this short documentary, 18 minutes long. I looked into doing it quote unquote on chain on ordinals, and 4 gigabytes is I think 2 or 3 times the average person's yearly income it costs. So yeah, right. And and I think I just kind of laugh at some of this early or this kind of more recent stuff, and it needs to be on chain, it needs to do this, because there's just so much art and data and usability that's just never going to be on chain, and there's nothing we can do about it. Like, you can't, like, if Spielberg shows up and say, hey, I want to put my new movie that I filmed in 8K and I did it with like, Leonardo DiCaprio or whatever, there's no way you're putting that on chain, especially Bitcoin. You're not going to do it recursive on Taproot. It's going to cost you the film budget itself to put 8K, to do it. So anyway, I agree with you on that stance. I think Counterparty is really underappreciated for that, and I think you are underappreciated for your tooling, because right now TokenScan is the only place that shows this project, TimeLineXCP, in a cool way. If I go to some of the other explorers, I can't get everything in a really awesome way for the user to just kind of get it all on their phone, on their computer, and be able to really like go through all the information I want them to. So just kudos to that. I still think, like, to this day, a lot of your tooling, the community relies on it so much. Yeah. And man, I cannot stress how much we're kind of glossing over here. There's rabbit holes for every single topic we're talking about, but I don't want to take up too much of J-Dog's time. If I really wanted to pick his brain, we'd be here for days, and we'd have to maybe share a couple bong rips to even go through everything, right? But I want to get back to your developer side of things, and that transition between John Villar and you becoming lead developer. And what was that? What happened there, and what was that time period like?
So John was the core developer at the time. He and Javier wasn't a core developer, but Javier worked a lot on Counterparty as well. And so I would be reviewing and testing John's code. He was the one writing the code. I didn't know Python. I understand it, but I'm like, I didn't want to take the time to learn another language. So yeah, John was the lead developer, and And yeah, one day, he he essentially died unexpectedly. A few years ago, we were kind of got tired of waiting around for other people to, like, everybody always has ideas. Well, you just need to have a MetaMask wallet, or you just need to get an exchange listing, or and after years and years of listening to this and being like, okay, somebody step up, like somebody in the community other than us, like, we're busy. We decided, like, look, this is it's our baby. Like, we're not going to force any contentious changes, but nothing's going to happen if we don't do it. So we really focused on exchange listings and reaching out to exchanges and figuring out how, the landscape. Most at that time, it was, pay to play. Like, nobody really wanted to list Counterparty. Every exchange wanted like $20,000-$30,000 to list. And so yeah, we tag team that for probably 6-7 months. We got a couple exchange listings, including the Dex trade one, and this was during COVID. And John, he did pretty good job of not, of staying home and getting not getting sick and stuff. But one day he's like, "Look, I caught a cold and I feel like crap, but don't worry. I went to the doctor. He gave me some meds. Everything's okay." And then, followed up the next day. "Hey, how are you feeling?" "Oh, I still feel like shit, but don't worry about it. I'll get back to it and whatnot." And his actual last message to me was like apologizing for. He's like, "I know we're doing the exchange launches, and you're setting up these. You're working with the exchanges now, and I'm really sorry to like let you down and get sick in this critical time." And I was like, "Bro, don't worry about it. Go get better." And then the next day, Javier reached out to me and said that John had passed. And that was a really big loss for me. I mean, I was pretty much an and shut in for many, many years. And him and I developed a really good friendship. But I had to stuff all that down because my concern had to be Counterparty. It had to be like, oh shit, now we have no maintainer. Robbie's not coming back. I don't even code in Python, but how's this going to happen? So I immediately that day when John reached out to Robbie and was like, hey, Counterparty needs a maintainer. I'm not going to be the guy writing the code necessarily, but I've been involved for a long time. I understand how important it is. You don't push out changes willy-nilly. Like, I've demonstrated. I'm a level-headed guy. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. You can be, a core developer. And so then Javier and I started kind of our relationship. Also, like, when John died, I knew he had his son and his daughters and stuff. So the Counterparty community, it's an amazing community. Like, the day that he died, we put together a fundraiser and we're like, look, John's gone, but he still has a kid. His kid needs to be taken care of. Like, and we put together, I think it was a dispenser, and raised like $40,000-$50,000, like almost overnight from the Counterparty community. And then sent it over to Javier, and we're like, look, this is to take care of John's son. So anyway, I'm getting a little emotional, but that's how I came to be the core developer. It fell into my lap, same as running the websites and owning, pretty much everything has kind of fallen into my laps at the time, because, only one who'd been around that long and was running things. It was never a power grab or wanting to be in charge of all this stuff. It was just like, nobody's left. So yeah, that's why I became the core developer. And then Javier and I started working together. And Javier's a genius too. And so we would put forth proposals like, hey, Counterparty improvement proposals, and same kind of dynamic that John and I had, where Javier would do the coding, and I'd say, hey, this is the way it should be implemented, or hey, it's do it this way or that way, and he would write the code, and then we test it together and find bugs and go back and forth. And so that was my tenure as a core developer, was just pretty much just reviewing, testing, and merging pull requests from Javier. That's why if you look at the code base, I didn't contribute a whole bunch of actual code to Counterparty, like maybe 20-30 commits, not a bunch. It was, most of my contribution was just keeping things running and then testing the hell out of everything, like manually testing everything. If we're putting out a dispenser change, you got to create a dispenser, fill a dispenser, close a dispenser, buy from a dispenser. It was a lot of manual testing.
Yeah. I came in a little late, and I can totally feel that weight that was lost when John passed. And we all really, he was such a mimetic person too. And his interviews are hilarious to look back on. Juan Galt has an interview with him in 2018. And one time I actually after he passed, I kind of broke down crying, because one of the earliest rare Pepes I bought, I was like, oh, I wonder who. It was a pretty rare one, and I was like, oh, I wonder. I'm gonna look back and see who sold me that. And I looked on the DEX, and it was John Villar that put that order up. And I was like, I broke down and was like, holy fucking shit! Like, damn, he meant so much to this community, and and we miss him very much. So yeah, it affects me too. It really, John's actions changed my life, and you keeping it running. I can't express to you how much I changed my outlook on the entire world and money and art and creation and coding when I got into Counterparty. So
yeah, it's a really unique community, and that's why I've stuck around for so long, is because the ethos of this, like, support, and we're all here, doing this together, and nothing gets changed without all of us kind of agreeing is in the best interest. And it's such a supportive community. So yeah, it's definitely a labor of love.
Yeah, we don't get no respect, huh? We don't get no respect.
Yeah. Well, it would be a different, and it already has kind of is changing. Like, money kind of changes. It influences things, and not always for the better. Yes, Rare Pepe was awesome and it was pure and true, but also, Counterparty lost some of its spirit when in my opinion, when Ethereum guys who are all about cash and pump and dump stuff found Rare Pepe, because then yay, we got some money in our pockets, but at the same time, like, you onboarded a whole bunch of people that really don't share the same values as the early people. And then kind of the same thing with, not to badmouth stamps, but kind of the same thing with stamps. Like, they're really just like, oh, this is a system we can use, and we're here to earn some money, and that took more focus than like, hey, how can we participate in the community in a responsible way? And so I think there's just people that show up and use the platform because you can, rather than like respecting the history of how everything's been run.
Yeah, in my research, I feel like every kind of change of lead developer kind of signified this change in the ethos of where the protocol was going and what people were building on it. That's a huge, and I didn't really realize that until way later after doing a lot of this research and history, is that like in the early days, it was like finance and overstock.com and we're going to make companies. And then later it was like, no, we're going to make these trading cards, we're going to make some games. And then it's a gaming thing. And then later it changed into different things. And I'm just, it reminds me how artists talk about kind of like when they make like something and then it gets used for something else in the future. Like when I was on the space with Rare Skrilla, I was talking about the Calvin and Hobbes, how Calvin is this entire character within all the comics, but then these people started making these stickers of Calvin pissing on something and putting it on the back of their trucks, right? And so, yeah. or I mean, straight up like Matt Fury, right? Matt Fury makes this, I think it was 6 panels or fours, and there's this guy named Pepe that's like, feels good, man. And then now everyone's like, no, feels bad, man, feels good, man. And then Wojak, and then so
Nazi symbols in there. And it's like, Jesus, that's not what I wanted to use it for.
Yeah, I can't really be too mad at early Fury for like assuming these things, because I bet people are calling him like, what are you, is this, do you this? And he's like, no, people are just using my image for the. But I think because it's this like source community, the community changes, the people that changes, and people leave, people come. I think that's just, I've personally kind of come to the realization that I think Counterparty is just this ever-forming, ever-evolving thing that not one person, it's never going to go in one person's favor the entire way. You're never really going to reach consensus, but when you do, it's a beautiful thing. So I guess I'll focus on that, because when you took over lead developer, there were some massive changes that happened that we heavily rely on to this day. 2 in particular I can think of is MPMA sends, which from my understanding uses P2SH encoding. And it made it so you could now send thousands of assets in a single send. It was a little bit more expensive, but it wasn't as expensive of sending them individually 1,000 times, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge change. Like I remember everybody was like, holy shit, we can really start moving things around. I can sell things in bulk. And then the second one was dispensers, as you've talked about many different times in the past. A lot of people use, you mentioned Vend.io or whatever. And, kind of the early, you had these external services, CoinDaddy, Tokenly, et cetera, that was doing this process, but it wasn't until this moment that you put it on a protocol level. And the way that you solved that BTC pay issue was with dispensers. And that got integrated at a protocol level. And that, I think, ignited the sales from these Ethereum people that came over and realized that they were lied to and that Ethereum wasn't the first to do a bunch of shit. So,
yeah,
right. You want to talk about go into a little more detail on dispensers and how that got integrated into a protocol level and
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, dispensers were kind of created by John and I, primarily because using, everybody holds Bitcoin, but and some people want tokens and they don't want to like have to go buy XCP off an exchange in order to like use them in a nice way. So John and I were talking like, how do we make it so that like in one transaction, somebody could just like send Bitcoin and buy like something, like just swap it back and forth. And so yeah, we came up with the idea of dispensers, like basically a vending machine. I was like, well, I already kind of did a vending machine, but it was trust, it required people to trust CoinDaddy. And luckily I didn't run off with the funds or anything, but like, well, if we're going to do this, it needs to be on a protocol level in a trustless way. There should be no trust involved in Counterparty as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, we came up with dispensers, and we also chatted about, this is going to be a great way to onboard a lot of people, because everybody has a Bitcoin wallet. Not everybody has an account. Not everybody wants to download a custom wallet to use Counterparty or like log into this clunky 8-9-year-old counter wallet. But if we create dispense and so that people can just, oh, there's a token I want, and send it just like a normal vending machine, put money in and you get your candy bar out or whatnot. That's a great way to like onboard people, because now they have this token, but they can't move it, they can't do anything with it other than look at it in their address on the Explorer. And it's going to incentivize people to be like, okay, well now I bought a rare Pepe, and how do I use it? Do I let me go to rare Pepe wallet, let me go to FreeWallet. It kind of was a great way to onboard people to Counterparty, kind of introduce them to it by backdooring them, making it easy for them to get a token. But now you have the token, you can't do anything with it until you download and learn a little bit more. And that was kind of like one of the things that John and I really enjoyed about Counterparty is I don't want to say we didn't want to make it easy to use, but the people that are here really love the platform, and they love it because they've taken the time and made the mistakes and learned about it. So we didn't want to make everything super easy. We kind of see it as like a rite of passage. Like, yeah, you get a token, and then you got to kind of learn what you can do with it. What are these dividends? What does this send and whatnot? So yeah, that was how we came up with dispensers. And there was a couple of iterations, creating a dispenser, and then people wanted to. You don't want to create a dispenser on your main address because accidentally trigger it by withdrawing stuff. So we added origin functionality, which is essentially creating a dispenser on a brand new empty address with no history associated with it. And so people could then create a wallet, create a new address, and open a dispenser and fund the dispenser from their main address, and then close the dispenser from their main address as well. So it was like, instead of doing it with 3 transactions, like if you wanted to open a dispenser previously, you had to send Bitcoin to the new address, you had to send your token to the new address, and then you had to do a dispenser open on the new address. And so John and I optimized that so that you could just fund and open fund the new address with the token and open a dispenser on that new address without the need for Bitcoin being on that new address. So it reduced the friction from 3 transactions to just 1 transaction. And same in reverse. You could close the dispenser on a different address from the same address that you opened it from, and the tokens returned to you. So it made managing the tokens back and forth from a main wallet much easier.
Yeah, I find that incredibly interesting. That I always was like kind of confused, because when you don't know anything kind of technical level, like kind of I was just a user of like, why don't it work, question mark, not even fully spelled right, or something like that in the chat. But when I got into I did some volunteer work to help write a user manual for FreeWallet, and I used to call that process, I remember the early iterations of I used to call it the old-fashioned way that you used to until the source was added. I actually didn't know about it. Someone told me, and I was like, wait, what, you can do that? There was, just to give you a kind of more personal side of things, I remember I was super interested in writing a user manual for FreeWallet just because there was a bunch of these features that you could do that like no one knew about. And I was like, well, what the hell? These are cool features, like dividends or subassets or destroying or et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, these are so freaking cool, and no other tokenized blockchain allows you to do this stuff. But even that, with that being said, there was always this issue from the start of how do we go from Bitcoin into an asset trustlessly. And in the early days, it was, very centralized. But then But then the whole ethos of the decentralized exchange and Pepe Cash, Bit Crystals was like, no, 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 you don't have to trust anybody. This is a decentralized exchange. It's going to happen without permission. You can do anything you want. And I get why you kind of went with that ethos of dispensers of like, well, how can we solve this problem? And I think obviously that's where, you know, a lot of these new talks with atomic swaps and stuff like that is, well, how do we make, because it seems that like Ordinals and Magic Eden have kind of figured out that partially signed Bitcoin transaction way. And people are, I don't know if it, like, again, I don't know, I'm not the most technical person, but it seems that the community's kind of accepted that now. But I don't think they realize how much of a, like, you can't, there's no such thing as just dispenser in Ordinals. There's no such thing as being able to read, like, you know, that functionality doesn't exist anywhere else. And I just find that remarkable, interesting, to try to solve this problem in a way with the ethos of the original Counterparty ethos. So yeah, I just love that story, and it really changed things, and I got to live through it, you know. And gosh, goddamn, J-Dog, are we old now? Because that was 7 years ago. That was 2018, yeah. Right? 2019.
Yeah, it was. Yep, it was a while ago.
Yeah, we're old now, but.
And then you were asking about MPMA.
Yeah.
How do we send a lot of stuff? Because, you know, fees were expensive, and like sending things one at a time was kind of a pain in the ass. Sweep the whole wallet. So yeah, John and I kind of came up with MPMAs, multi-peer, multi-asset sends, where you could just like get a list and honk it into an API, and in the background, you know, you compress the list so that it's, you know, you make it as the transaction as small as possible, and you use P2SH encoding. Well, you used to be able to use P2SH encoding, which was it's a 2 transactions, but it was way cheaper because you could encode a lot of data. But even MPMA sends like had issues. Like you couldn't reliably send. It was supposedly limitless. Like you could send, John was like, oh, we can send like thousands and thousands. But in reality, like people were kind of complaining all the time. Like, hey, I tried to send 103 and it doesn't work. And then you'd have other cases where somebody's like, oh, I sent like 2,000, no problem. So it was clear there was like some instabilities in there. And so after John, I'm pretty sure it was after John passed, like Javier and I kind of went back through that and retooled it again. And we're like, okay, well, we're going to put 1,000 limit on it. You know, 1,000 is a lot of tokens to be able to send in a single transaction, but we're going to make it way more stable. So there's not, you know, I don't know why you can't do that send. It was weird combinations it was just lots of some bugs in there that made it work a lot of the times, but people would have to like drop off an address or two and then it would work. And so we made it a lot more stable.
Speaking of bugs in the system, bad hair day. Right. That that is some lore. I'm pretty sure that happened under, I'd have to check my timeline. I wrote all of this. I still don't have it memorized. Let me see where Bad Hair Day is. So that was under that was during your when you were lead developer. And then there was another instance of Bad Burger Day. Talk about the lore around those cards and what they represent.
When Counterparty doesn't crash very often. Like you do a lot of testing over the years to make sure that it doesn't crash, because you're dealing with it's a stressful freaking job. When it's low value stuff, it's not as stressful. But when you're like, oh my God, all the value of rare Pepes and Spells of Genesis and everything rides on every single change, it is very, very stressful to be like, okay, well, you screw up and now you just lost someone sending Bitcoin to the wrong address, or like, so my point is there's lots and lots of testing that's gone in to keep Counterparty up. And John and Javier and I, we would joke about this, but when we put out releases, we would have nightmares. Like worst case scenario, oh my God, the system is down because it's go time. It's like the system's down, nothing is happening. Everybody sees publicly that the system is down and it's on us. There's nobody around, the co-founders aren't around. Like it's just our brains that got to figure out what the hell is going on. And so the reason I'm saying that is because I was super stressed at those times. I don't remember exactly what was going on. John and I would just be in chat like, okay, well, this is, you know, worst case scenario, all hands on deck. Like, what is this? Oh, somebody opened up a dispenser for Vote or VOAT, which I think was the
Vote Burger. I think
So I don't remember the specifics of what the issues were. I'm sure that if you dig through the GitHub, like John and I and Javier explained what they are. But at the time, you know, my only concern is, oh crap, we got to get this thing up as soon as possible. And we really kind of prided ourselves on like it shouldn't be down for more than it should never be down. But if it does go down, you don't sleep. You stay awake and you hack on it until it is fixed, and you figure it out. You test it and you bring things back up, and then you retest it. So it's not a good answer, but I don't remember all of those. I remember Bad Hair Day, or hair. What was it? Hair Pepe caused one of the crashes, but I can't remember if it was an order or a dispense or whatnot. But I do remember the Bad Burger Day was Vote, VOAT burger. I think somebody created a dispenser, and if I recall, I think they created a dispense. They basically found a hole. It was like they created a transaction to create a dispenser and spammed it really quickly. And previously, somebody would create a dispenser and it would get opened, and you could refill it. But in this case, I think both open transactions hit in the same block, and so it caused a crash or something rather. Some rare test we had not tested manually yet.
Yeah, I just read it. It looked like they were trying to put up two dispensers and it was mined in the same block, and then it kind of got confused. It seems like it was fixed in a pretty fast manner. And then I just want to make sure, because I don't like to say things that aren't accurate, so I got to correct myself. That Bad Hair Day happened in 2017 under Devin Weller, and I just want to read out on the Bitcoin Talk forum post what happened with Hair Pepe in that situation, because again, you weren't. It was long before you were lead developer. But the issue then was the parameters chosen for a Hair Pepe order hit up on an obscure bug where the calculated integer value chosen for the order quantity was higher than the max integer value for SQLite, but equal to the max int value used in the Python validation code. Thus, the value is not limited to. I read that and I was like, "What the fuck happened?"
It's good in the protocol, but when it goes to a query in the database, it goes kaboom.
But no, I just find that interesting that when bugs like that happen, which in my reading and history, they were fixed pretty quickly and everything was back on track in a really quick manner at those times. And I just find it funny that then people started to make art around that, like, oh, Bad Hair Day, and Bad Hair Day is now like in the Fake Rare Series 0 collection.
Oh yeah, no, it became a badge of honor. Like, haha, I managed to crash Counterparty.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, this is kind of why, with recently I was sad that CIPs got closed, because in the early days, CIPs, there was this big bounty for if you found bugs. The code base was audited by Sergio Lerner, I think was his name, and you guys had a lot of bounties of like, hey, if you guys find a bug in the code, let us know. Like, that we've tried to find them ourselves, and you guys would give, in the early days, right, give some bounty for if they found anything. And I think that was super important, that you invited people to test it all and invited people to like, hey, see where we're wrong. I would love to know, and I just think that ethos is way different than any other blockchain kind of system or community out there. I'm sure there's way other ones that I'm not into, but I just respected that when I read it. Now we're getting into more kind of recent stuff. Before, I want to talk to you about what Modern and Root Relics is, but before we get into that, let's talk about the revitalization of Dogeparty and the Rare Doge collection. When did that happen, and how did that come about?
Sure. So I told you I got started in Dogeparty, and was it always held a place near and dear to my heart. And so I was doing all the stuff on Counterparty and fork Dash Party, and it was kind of familiar with, it wouldn't be that difficult to fork the current Counterparty code base and tweak it to bring Dogeparty back up. And so Javier and I chatted about it, and we also Counterparty doesn't pay, all labor of love, and we both were like, well, okay, how could we get some funds? And so we decided to reboot Dogeparty, but instead of burning BURN, destroying the Dogecoin, we did a BERN, which was essentially throwing your, people could burn or send Dogecoin for XDP. They'd send it to a special address, and would get held in this address. And I'm the one who has access to that address, but the funds are controlled by the community. So step one was get the platform working with all the current features of Counterparty. Step two was do the burn for 30 days where people could, a lot of the wallets were dormant and stuff. So we're like, well, if this is going to work, we're going to have to do another burn. And it has a benefit of having funds that the community can then draw on to keep the protocol alive, as well as getting some XDP in the hands of new users who will actually use the platform rather than like trying to buy it from all these long gone dormant wallets. So yeah, we rebooted the platform, parsed all the 5 or 6 years of empty blocks, so that the history went all the way back to the beginning. And then after the burn was done, we held a foundation election where community members were same way that Counterparty Foundation was run, essentially. Like, people would nominate themselves or nominate other people, and then they would there would be a vote held with XDP, people who actually hold the token, and then the winners of those would be elected to the foundation for a year, and then those foundation members represent the community. And at that point, after like 3 or 4 months of work and getting it all done, Javier and I were like, hey, can we get like 20 grand or whatever it was? I think it was 2025 for our work to boot this thing back up, and the foundation approved it. So Dogeparty does have a fund. I think it's like 600,000-700,000 now. We're very conservative on, we want this thing to be around for a long, long time. Not like the first time where they just ran out of funds and didn't, running stuff costs money, like the servers and explorers and stuff. So we want to make sure we have funds to run for a long time.
That's so respectable, J-Dog. I know you get there's a lot of people that disagree with a lot of your choices over the years, but I don't think they realize that they might say it, but I don't think they truly realize how much you held up Counterparty and then came back and revitalized Dogeparty in a way that you felt was the most fair way. I remember the foundation. I remember I voted for people. I think I remember because I knew of Crypto Chainer, and there was a couple other individuals. I was like, oh yeah, that would be great to kind of get them to be a part of the team. And I just hope that that a lot of people behind the scenes, we might not message too much, but we really respect that and hold that to a really high honor that it's still live. Dogeparty is so fun. It is so slept on. It is. I love tell me about the rare Doge collection, because obviously it was an offshoot of the rare Pepe collection.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when we rebooted Dogeparty, we're like, well, cool, we can boot up the platform, and yay, people will be excited because all the old tokens are there, and so like 8 years later, you can go log into your wallet from your with your 12-word passphrase from the never time, and boom, your tokens are still there. But we didn't want to just rely on old people showing up for usage. So like, well, the quickest way to get usage is to start up an NFT project. And so rare Pepe had been created and shined and got ETH volume and whatnot. So we're like, all right, well, Doge is a pretty popular meme as well. It's right after Pepe, so why don't we just start up a rare Doge directory? And so I literally like copied almost word for word from the rare Pepe directory, the startup about page, and said it paid homage to the rare Pepe scientists, of which I was one, and was like, hey, this is pretty much an exact copy of it. The only difference is previously it was like manual voting via Telegram, and in this case, I wanted to make it. I remember what a pain in the ass it was to do voting and whatnot. So I wrote some back-end tools where the rare Pepe or the rare Doge scientists log in, and it would show the image, the information on it, and you can click approve, reject, neutral, or delete. We never deleted anything. But one of the drawbacks that I heard people complain about with rare Pepe was like, oh, there's a reject. Like I got this, my card never made it in. And I very rarely did rare Pepe reject cards, but there were some cool cards that were rejected, and I didn't feel like they got properly honored. And so when I created the rare Doge directory, I also created the rare reject directory. So it's like, well, even people are paying a submission fee to try to get this in front of the scientists to see if it's good enough to approve or reject. So even if you don't get into the rare Pepe or rare Doge directory, you'll get into the rare reject directory. And so I think we just closed on January 1st after 3 years. I think we have like 1,500 rare rare Doges, and then in the rare rejects we have like 700 plus.
So
like
you have more than rare Pepe now in rare Doge.
Yeah.
Assets, yeah.
Yeah, some of the scientists, initially it was the same rare Pepe scientists. I was like, hey guys, like just come over here and vote. Like I made it easy. All you gotta do is log in once a week and like click green and red buttons. It's easier than it was when Telegram and all that stuff. But the most of the rare Pepe scientists were busy with other stuff, and so they didn't really vote all that often. I kind of got tired of asking, so I onboarded a couple other, I won't say who, but some other people, and they didn't necessarily understand the same voting process as the Red Pepe scientist did, which is like it wasn't really opinion, is this good artwork or bad artwork? It was like, is this super offensive and something we don't want to represent us or not? And so that's why I didn't expect to have the Jack directory be as 700 plus cards in it, but some of the scientists, it only took 2 votes to kick it out of the directory. So some of the scientists were like, oh, I don't like this artwork. Boop. And so the Rare Reject directory grew pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was incredibly, when I found out about the Rare Reject side of things, I was like, this is fucking intelligent. This is so smart. And it's because if you know anything about Rare Pepes, I mean, first off, I was rejected from Rare Pepes, and you should see these DMs I sent to Mike, man. You would be embarrassed for me. I was so mad. And then on top, I talked about this with Skrilla on the last interview a couple days ago. Anybody who's listening to this can go back and listen to it. But I told Rare Skrilla that he made this directory called the Fake Rare directory, which included some of the rejected ones, and then invited people to do it. And I got rejected from that too. And I was so pissed. So then the Dank Rare directory came out, and Dank Rare is awesome. The art there and the memes and so there's look at that story, right? There's 3 directories on a split just due to rejects, right? Or due to this barrier of entry. And I really love the rejects because some people started putting art in and being like, please reject this. I want this to be a reject. Because that's incredible, because then people started making art of being like, I want this to be a part of the Rare Reject directory. And I think that was genius, because now, if it was offensive or something, you just wouldn't admit it to either. But I doubt many entries were really, I don't know. Did you have any entries that you really had to like not include it? Yeah. So
no, there was not a single entry. Like, I had a delete button for like, hey, if somebody puts up some child porn or beheading video or something, I need to have an option to get it out of the, but no, I never had to use that button. It was everything that was submitted was either approved or rejected into one of the directories.
That says something about the community, that you never really had to censor anything due to it being illegal content. So that says something about, and the Doge community, and again, I could ramble about it because I love Rare Doge, but the Doge community became kind of different. A little bit different artists came in that wanted to make art around Shiba or dogs, and it was complete different ethos in the Rare Pepe community, which was sometimes highly political or edgy, and et cetera, et cetera. But man, I'm sad to see the Rare Doge directory go, but I can understand 3 years is a long time, and
you got to let other projects have their chance to shine. There's only so many artists in the space. I mean, there's a lot, but in Dogeparty, but I feel like every time I'd open the directory, like, you're robbing artists from other projects. They're like, oh crap, it's open. I would spend all my time doing this. So it was time for it to close. And the Rare Doge directory, actually, like, when it first launched, there were some other projects that launched that were really, I thought, really innovative. And there was a distribution model I'd never seen before, which was the KVLT cult.
Oh no, we're getting into it. Yeah, not many people know about the KVLT.
Yeah, it was like this guy or person that created a card and was like, hey, here's this card, and if you buy it, like, basically the project is anybody can submit cards, but you submit a card and you have to airdrop that card to all the holders of the original card. So it became like people like Crypto Chainer and I were like, holy crap, this is free airdrops. Like, I'm going to buy this coin regardless of what it costs, because every single piece of artwork that is going to be submitted, I don't have to buy. Like, it's just going to get airdropped to me. And there's and it was like, it's a cult. Like, the artwork is dark, but it's never over the line. I think it's just dark tarot cards and blood and gore and horror and stuff. But
oh my god. So I don't want to go into it too much, because Doge KVLT was crazy. I was a part of that collection.
Nice.
I thought the distribution process was so interesting, of this cult of like, if you want to be a part of this, you got to give it to everybody that already owns a KVLT card. That was incredible. And it was run by this anonymous guy named Canavelis, or I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
And dude, the art in that directory is so dark. I mean, just it is. And what's funny? If you go to it's Doge KVLT, if you go to the website, the entry is like, well, don't make pussy art. Like, that was like in the submission form.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people were really into hardcore music and like cards about cults and like, oh my god, like, just some of the, I still think it's incredible. It's hated on, but I think maybe eventually it'll get looked back on and like, wow, this is crazy interesting.
Yeah. Well, the distribution model of like buying a main token and getting the airdrops is I'd never seen that before. There's another project that recently, in the last 6-9 months or so, started up called King Ket on Dogeparty, which is a similar distribution model. Like, you buy the main token, and then everybody that holds the main token, when you submit artwork and it gets approved, you automatically get the airdrop of all of the cards.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really unique model. It kind of is like fake ASF. Like that was initially airdropped to everybody, but it was like a submission token that, you know, you have to burn this to submit. So anyway, there's some cool distribution models out there.
Oh yeah, and I'm excited to see Dogeparty. It sounds like the foundation has some funds, and it sounds like you guys got a good kind of social structure going on over there. So I'm excited to see what else comes about there on the Doge side of things. But that leads me into a project that exists on Doge and Counterparty, and it's similar in that sense of mean, you know, nice art versus mean art, and it's the Modern Relics and Rude Relics collection. Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Okay, I got like 15 more minutes.
Oh shit, I have so many more questions, but okay, that's fine. It's fine.
We can do another.
Okay,
You know,
okay,
schedule
okay.
for another week or two, and,
Okay.
and I'm happy to. But I got a date.
No worries. Oh yeah, that's right. No, I don't want to get in the way of the date. You got that W Riz. You got to get that W Riz going on.
Yeah. So yeah, ancient relics and rude relics. With most of my project, I also did Mafia Wars.
You did Mafia Wars?
Yeah,
What?
I did it anonymously, but yeah,
I didn't know that. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So with all of my projects, I kind of try to push limit of what like you can do with experimentation. So Bitcoins came out and it was like, hey, buy this token and you can submit cards and whatnot. And it was an idle game. And I really liked the concept. I was like, that's cool. But I wanted it to benefit all of the people in the space. And so when I created Mafia Wars, I went through a ton of the cards and like assigned them all properties. So anyway, it was an idle game, but it was an idle game that wasn't just for the cards in the game. It was an idle game where, you know, if you had rare Pepe cards, guess what? If you buy the main Mafia Wars token, you automatically have like staff members and properties and bling and stuff that, you know, in the game. So it was kind of just a game to encourage collecting more counterparty tokens. Anyway, back to my ancient relics and modern, or not ancient relics is what I just launched a couple weeks ago. But modern relics and rude relics. So I had all of these asset names that I've been sitting on for years. You know, nobody's coming to buy them. I mean, I get a sale every once in a while, but you know, lots of really good names. And so Ernest and I, people show up and like show they're really interested, and then I'll partner with them on a project. Like when Xer showed up and he was around for a couple of years and was really interested in stuff, so I was like, okay, well, you can be a co-founder on Dogeparty and you know, the reboot and whatnot. Kind of did the same thing with Ernest. He was around for a few years and showed he really has an interest in learning more. So I was like, okay, well, let's do a project with some of these old tokens. And the idea was essentially, I wanted to play around with subs. One, I wanted to get some of these good words out into distribution. So the project was essentially picking like 20 words on Dogeparty, and I wanted to play with a project that was cross blockchain. Like I lived on 2 blockchains, Dogeparty and Counterparty. So I picked like 20 words from each you know, theme, like some of them like fairy and you know, dragon and some common words for the modern relics. And then for rude relics, I went and used some of my nastier words, shart and hooker and, you know, dirty Sanchez and all sorts of just stuff. So the idea was, you know, edgy art and then cleaner art. And so the idea was artists would submit artwork to be the official artwork of this token that was dated back. So it had some provenance and, you know, it was created a long time ago, but artists would submit a whole bunch of artwork. Every month there would be a contest and we would pick one winner to be the official artwork for the token. And then everyone that submitted designs and wasn't a winner, when you did your submission, you kind of picked your sub asset name. And so we would issue a sub asset. So say we had the fucked token that wound up being, the winner wound up being like Sam Altman Bank, you know, it was after the SBF or the FTX collapse. The winning artwork was that artwork, but everybody that submitted artwork that wasn't the winning one got a sub asset issued. So they got like fucked dot whatever their sub asset name they wanted. So project was kind of playing around with themed artwork as well as playing, you know, testing how much the community would like you know, themed artwork associated with the main token. And you can still submit to those, even though the project, you know, there's no winner. All the main token winners have been picked, it's still open. Like anybody can go be like, oh, I'm hooker. I think I have an idea for a hooker piece of artwork, and design a hooker. And I'm using the rude relics ones because I think they're more interesting. But so yeah, that was the concept with those projects, was kind of playing around with Subassets, around with derivative themed artwork. And I've always wanted to do like a rare Pepe sub-asset project, which is why over the last few years I've been collecting rare Pepe asset ownership. So when I launch this project, that'll come in another year or so.
That is so cool. But and that process, if people aren't aware of that, you have these ancient tokens, really old tokens. I mean, years, almost some of them almost a decade, right? And then now you're coming up with a revitalized way to use them through artist submission process and almost contest way with curation and there's a lot more there too. But I know you got to run in just a little bit, and maybe we'll have to schedule another space and talk about all of the later stuff, because, and I'm just going to read I have things marked down right here, like crypto messaging, the BTNS platform, and then the new Xchain platform. If you want to just kind of lead us out on what you're working on right now and what your plans on for the future, and then we can get you on this date so you're not late and she doesn't judge you for me being a nerd and want to learn more about history.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, BTNS was kind of born out of the SRC stamps kind of stuff. Like the stamps guys showed up and we're experimenting around, and I was like, hey, if you do stuff on Counterparty, here's kind of a spec that I wrote that will let you do it kind of responsibly. They didn't really pay much attention to it, but I thought it was a fun thought experiment. So I was like, oh, well, this is a really quick way for me to, build out a whole bunch of features for, that I wanted to integrate into Counterparty, but that I haven't had, consensus to integrate. So I built up the spec with all the current features of Counterparty, as well as some additional stuff like airdrops and rugs and lists and a whole bunch of extra functionality. And once I was done with the thought experiment of building out the specs, I was like, all right, well, I'm kind of bored, so let me actually write the platform, write the code that actually makes all this, translates it from spec into actual working issuing of tokens and stuff. And so I did that, wrote the indexer over a period of months and kind of put it out there. And one of the things that I really liked about it, Counterparty tied to the blockchain, the underlying blockchain. There's really tight integration between the logic and the encoding and decoding. And with this BTNS platform or spec, it was like an indexer where you're just taking strings. Like at the end of the day, account is just encoding information into transactions and then decoding it and then parsing that string and doing something with it. And so I took that to the next level where I was like, okay, well, if we're just encoding strings, then I can run this on multiple blockchains. And so when I spun up the BTNS indexer, I spun it up on Dogeparty and Counterparty. So it's basically one code base that you write and maintain features on, and then you can write the strings to any blockchain. It's just like the blockchain is just kind of like a dumb database that just stores strings. So I built that out and kind of put it out there. It's like, hey, you can issue tokens if you want, and like it got some fanfare and some usage, and then the one day I woke up and my server was kind of going crazy, and apparently the Chinese had discovered it and were like minting the hell out of it. And I have FreeWallet, which has an automatic donation system. Like every 25th transaction or so, it sends me, and it's all optional, but it sends me a little bit of Bitcoin or Dogecoin. Because for years I was like, hey, I'm writing all this stuff. Can you guys please donate? Nobody ever really donated, and so put an automatic donation system in the wallet where it's optional and users are aware of it. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that overnight I got, like, just from people spamming transactions in FreeWallet, I got like 10,000 in donations, like in 24 hours from these Chinese people going crazy. So it kind of clicked with me, like, all right, I'm onto something here. And so then
so that influenced the new Xchain platform, which you're currently working on right now.
Yeah. So the new develop, so it's been a process. But yeah, the last year, when the stamps fork kind of happened earlier in the year, it became too stressful for me, and it was clear, like, there's a new breed of people that are showing up, and they're not, they're painting me as the bad guy, and they don't really want to listen to how I feel things should be. And so that's kind of the same time that Adam and team came back, and so I handed control kind of over to them, and it's like, don't change this, and this, or else, not or else, but please don't change these things. And then I kind of stepped away and focused on building Xchain platform. So Yeah, Xchain is essentially just a continuation of BTNS. BTNS was kind of a proof of concept, like, yeah, you can write an indexer and maintain one code base and write it to multiple blockchains. Xchain platform is a more polished version of it. Javier has written the encoder and decoder. I've written the indexer. And so, yeah, we've been working on it for about a year off and on. And it will initially launch on Bitcoin and Dogecoin. But it can be plugged into any blockchain. So, if Ethereum or Dash or whoever is like, hey, this is a cool token platform system, we bolt it onto our blockchain. That can be done pretty easily. And same with private block. Like if there's a company that's like, holy moly, we want to, this is a cool token platform, we want to be able to copy this and tweak it, that can happen as well. So I'm not really too focused on the monetization of it or making it profitable. I'm just building the base platform and putting out there and launching it, kind of similar to the way Counterparty is. And then I have a company, Dankest LLC, which I'll have some services that will run on the platform, but the platform itself will be just 100% open source and no fees, it will be decentralized and trustless, very similar to Counterparty and Dogeparty.
Cool. Well, there again, I've said it throughout this time we've had together 1,000 times. There's 1,000 other questions I could probably ask you from every single aspect of what we went through, but I just want to give a big thank you for coming out and taking the time, and wish you luck on this date. Make sure that she's okay with Bitcoin and complete nerd coding on Counterparty and stuff. But I'm really excited to see how Xchain works out. I messed around with BTNS and I thought it was really fun. Thought it was intuitive. I thought it was cool. I thought it hadn't been done before yet, and it was pretty fun. But yeah, we'll hopefully get some more time to talk about some other aspects. Just so much history, right? We just condensed, I don't know how many years down into about 2 hours and 15 minutes, and we glossed over so much. But thanks for everyone for coming out. And if you're listening to this, I hope you learned a little bit, because I know I did just during this talk. And just if there's anything else you'd like to say, usually at the end of this, I start to shill my research and the TimeLineXCP token and such. But
yeah, go for it. You've let me just, you've given me the accolades. Let me give you some. You showed up to the Counterparty and Dogeparty space. You've been really interested. You've done exactly what I think somebody should do. You didn't just show up and say, how can I earn money here? You're like, wow, this is cool stuff. Let me learn more. Let me contribute. And I really appreciate the you lightened the burden on me, because I'll write the wallets and explorers and stuff, but customer support and documentation, I don't want to write that stuff. And so I would constantly for many years, answer the same questions again and again and again and again. And it got very frustrating. And so it's a blessing to have somebody like you show up and be like, here's a hole that I can fill and write some documentation and help out the community. I write tools, but nobody knows how to use those tools without people like you who make it easier to understand and write articles. So and that's not even going into how much value you've contributed by documenting all the historical NFTs. So you're the MVP as well, sir.
Well, thanks. Just know that, I stand on the shoulders of giants, and that, you guys set an example all these years before. And I, saw that example and say, hey, well, talk is one thing, but actually building and doing something is completely different. And I wanted to help anywhere I could. And I'm really happy I did. I got a lot of experience, and I'm really proud of what I did. So, FreeWallet user manual, if you guys aren't aware, I wrote the user manual for the desktop version. And getting refined here and there, things change, but it's pretty good the way it is now. I mean, I know, it started off with just a little GitHub post, but I'll let you go, and thanks for the kind words. Basically, JDog is a part of a huge span of history of historical NFTs living on top of Counterparty and Dogeparty. And I did a big research project for it. It's called TimeLineXCP. And all of the research lives on top of a token. So all the research that I did, I included a short documentary as well. It goes through the first 5 years of history. We kind of went over some of that history here in the talk and in the space, and you can see all of that. It's free. You can just look at it, and it lives published on the blockchain. No other service. You can just go and find it, and you can learn. So I'm doing a little. It was also a fake rare card in the fake rare collection. So it's in a curated art collection as well. I think that was kind of the cherry on top for research. I don't know if anyone's ever tokenized a research project, maybe other than Folding Coin, but not in this manner. I don't know if anyone's even tokenized a documentary yet on Counterparty specifically. I could take a guess, and probably for sure other people put documentaries on other chains. But if you guys are interested, you like this talk, you enjoyed this, I'm going to do a bunch more talks in the future with some incredibly historic people just like J-Dog, and we're going to learn as we go, because there's always something more to learn. No matter how much research I do and how many hours, there's always something. And I blame you, Jay. You're always something else, dude. There's always, I'm never going to finish this project, am I? But that's just the whole point of TimeLineXCP, is that that little infographic in the token, when I update stuff, it updates automatically. And so you just knowing that token's there can be able to go and see things as they change. And this whole idea of like, well, what if the token data gets lost? Well, you know what? I also put it on a GitHub repo, and all the data is on a GitHub repo. And if you're a super nerd, you can go into the JSON file, which I somehow figured out. Thank God for AI, and thank God for Indelible Trade, who helped me out with that, because I didn't know anything about I didn't even know what a JSON was. When I didn't truly know what it meant until I started it. So all the data is there. It's public, and buying TimeLineXCP from Scarcity right now can give you some cool extra perks. I'm giving some very limited edition physical things associated with it, like a big 1/1 canvas print of the entire timeline, version 1.0, and some like a calendar, some cool coffee mugs. So if you guys are interested in supporting my research and supporting some of the volunteer work I did for writing the user manual for FreeWallet and helping people out in the chat, and if you just think it's a cool resource that you like, man, a sale from that like truly helps me out. So I cannot stress how much it helps me right now. So just a shout out to everyone here. And again, thanks, J-Dog. Good luck on the date. Thank
you very much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thanks again for everyone coming out. And again, doing some more interviews in the future. I did an interview with Adam B. Levine yesterday, Rare Skrilla the day prior, and then Tatiana Moroz the day prior to that. So you guys can go and listen to that. These spaces are recorded. And I think I'm gonna use some of this content for some cool little videos in the future too. So while we learn, we can also make some cool content to make sure everybody else learns in a more short, short style content as well. So much love to everyone. Shout out just that people that I've seen here a while. Damien, shout out Damien. Shout out Sasha. Shout out Cody. Dr. Scratch. Just Keys, you guys are awesome. Thanks for coming out to support, and I will be back tomorrow talking with, I believe, I'm gonna check my schedule, I'm talking with Nathan, the creator of Kaleidoscope, one of the most interesting and underground projects on Counterparty. So if you want to learn more about Counterparty history, this HNFT history that no one really is aware about, in my opinion, we can get to learn together. So thanks for coming out, and I'll end the space there. Cheers, guys.